It was a super quiet afternoon in a tiny little town. The kind of town where nothing big ever happens. Birds chirped, the sun shone, and everything felt slow and sleepy. On a small house with a creaky old porch sat a man named Harold. Old Man Harold, that's what everyone called him. He was just sitting there, holding a cold glass of lemonade. He took little sips and watched the world go by, nice and easy. Harold looked like any other grandpa you might see. His hair was all gray, like fluffy clouds on a rainy day. His face had lots of wrinkles, like little lines from smiling or frowning too much. And when he walked, he moved slow, like he had all the time in the world. His shoes made a soft shuffle sound on the ground. Most people in town didn't even notice him. They walked right by, busy with their own stuff. Kids, though. They noticed him. But not in a nice way. They'd giggle and whisper, "Look, it's the lonely old guy." Then they'd run off, laughing like it was a big joke. Harold didn't seem to mind. He'd just sit there, sipping his lemonade, looking out at the street. Sometimes he'd wave at a bird or nod at a passing car. He seemed happy enough, all by himself. But here's the thing nobody knew, Harold wasn't just some boring old grandpa. Nope. He had a secret. A really, really big secret. And it wasn't something small, like he had extra candy hidden in his pockets. This was a secret so huge, it could make your eyes pop wide open if you found out. What was it? Well, let's just say Harold wasn't always this quiet old man sitting on a porch. Under that faded, baggy sweater he always wore, the one with little holes in it, was a past full of wild stuff. Brave stuff. Dangerous stuff. Stuff nobody in this sleepy town could even imagine. Harold had seen things. Done things. Big, crazy things that would make your jaw drop to the floor. But he didn't tell anyone. Not a single soul. He kept it all locked up inside, like a treasure chest with no key. For now, he was happy just sitting there, feeling the warm sun on his face and the cool breeze in his hair. The town went on like usual. Dogs barked. Cats napped in the grass. Kids rode their bikes up and down the street, yelling and laughing. Harold watched it all, quiet as a mouse. He liked the peace. It was his little world, just him and his porch and his lemonade. And that's how it stayed for a long time. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Nothing changed. Harold was just the old guy in the faded sweater, the one nobody thought about twice. But then, one day, something happened. Something loud. Something mean. Something that was about to shake up Harold's quiet little life. See, Harold's peaceful days were about to get interrupted. Big time. And it all started with them. Who's them, you ask? Well, imagine this, a bunch of tough-looking guys on big, noisy motorcycles. Their bikes roared like angry lions, so loud you could hear them from miles away. They weren't from this town. Nope. They were outsiders, rolling in like they owned the place. Their jackets were black and shiny, made of leather that squeaked when they moved. Their boots were heavy, stomping the ground like they wanted everyone to know they were here. And their voices? Loud and rough, like they didn't care who heard them. These guys weren't here to make friends. They were trouble. The kind of trouble that makes dogs hide under porches and moms pull their kids inside. And guess who they saw when they rolled into town? Yep. Harold. Sitting there on his creaky porch, sipping his lemonade, minding his own business. To them, he looked like an easy target. Just an old man. A lonely old guy. Someone they could mess with for fun. They didn't know it yet, but they were so wrong. Harold wasn't what he seemed. Not even close. Those bikers thought they were tough. They thought they could scare anyone. But Harold? He'd faced way scarier things than a bunch of loud guys on bikes. Way scarier. And deep down, under that calm face and slow walk, Harold was ready. Not that he showed it. Not yet. So there he was, sitting on his porch, when the bikers pulled up. The engines growled, and dust flew everywhere. Harold didn't move. He didn't jump up or run inside. He just sat there, holding his glass, watching them with those sharp old eyes of his. The bikers laughed, pointing at him like he was some kind of joke. "Hey, Grandpa," one of them yelled. "What's an old guy like you doing out here all alone?" Harold didn't answer. He took another sip of lemonade, slow and steady. The bikers laughed louder. They thought he was scared. They thought he was weak. They thought they could do whatever they wanted. Oh, how wrong they were. What do you think Harold's hiding? I bet you're curious now, huh? Is he just an old man who likes lemonade, or is there something way cooler going on? Stick around, because this story's about to get wild. You won't believe what's coming next. Harold's secret is bigger than you think, and those bikers, they're in for a surprise they'll never forget. Keep watching, this is just the start. The quiet afternoon was gone in a flash. A loud noise broke the peace like thunder, but worse. It was engines. Big, growling engines from motorcycles. A gang of bikers rolled into the sleepy little town, and they weren't quiet about it. Their bikes roared so loud the windows shook. Dust flew up behind them, making clouds in the air. They wore shiny black leather jackets that looked tough and cool. Their laughs were loud, bouncing off the houses like they didn't care who heard. These guys weren't here to be nice. They were looking for trouble. And then they saw him, Harold. Old man Harold, sitting on his creaky porch, holding his lemonade. He was just sipping away, calm as could be, watching the world like always. To the bikers, he looked like the perfect person to pick on. An old guy, all alone, with his gray hair and slow walk. They thought he'd be easy to scare. They thought wrong. The leader of the gang was a big guy with a scruffy beard. It stuck out all messy, like he hadn't brushed it in forever. He jumped off his bike and stomped toward Harold's porch. "Hey, old man," he shouted, his voice rough and mean. "You too slow to run from us." The other bikers laughed, like it was the funniest thing ever. They stayed on their bikes, watching, waiting to see what would happen. Harold didn't move. Not even a little. He didn't jump up or drop his glass. He just sat there, holding his lemonade, taking a tiny sip. His eyes were calm, but if you looked close, they were sharp like a hawk watching its prey. The bikers didn't notice that part. They were too busy being loud. They revved their engines, making the noise even bigger, trying to make Harold jump or flinch. But he didn't. He stayed still, like a rock in a storm. "Move along, boys," Harold said. His voice was soft, almost quiet. You had to listen hard to hear it over the engines. But he didn't sound scared. He sounded steady. Like he wasn't worried at all. That made the bikers mad. Really mad. They didn't like that he wasn't afraid. They wanted him to shake or run or beg them to stop. But Harold, he just sipped his lemonade again, like they were nothing to him. "What's that, Grandpa?" another biker sneered. This one was skinny, with a pointy nose and a mean grin. "Gonna fight us with your cane?" He laughed, and the others joined in, hooting and hollering. They thought they were so clever. They thought Harold was weak because he was old. They didn't know who they were messing with. Not yet. Then they started getting meaner. One of them grabbed an empty soda can from his pocket and tossed it right at Harold's porch. It clattered on the wood, rolling to a stop near his feet. Another biker kicked dirt with his big boot, sending it flying onto Harold's steps. The dust floated up, making a mess. They weren't done. They started circling his house with their bikes, going round and round like wolves hunting something small. The engines roared louder, the tires squealed, and the air got thick with noise and dirt. The neighbors saw it all. They peeked out their windows, pulling back curtains just a little. They watched the bikers laugh and shout. They saw the cans hit the porch. But did they come out to help? Nope. They stayed inside, quiet as mice, too scared to do anything. Maybe they thought Harold was just an old man too. Maybe they thought he couldn't handle this. They didn't say a word. Harold didn't say much either. He didn't yell back or shake his fist. He didn't call for help. He just sat there, watching them. His face didn't change. His hands didn't shake. He looked at the bikers like he was studying them, every move, every laugh, every mean word. His eyes followed them as they circled, calm and sharp. What was he thinking? Was he scared deep down? Was he mad? Or was something else going on in that quiet head of his? The bikers kept going. "Look at him!" Scruffy Beard yelled. "Too old to even stand up." They laughed again, throwing another can. It bounced off the porch railing with a loud clang. Harold didn't even blink. He picked up his glass, took another sip, and set it back down. Slow. Steady. Like he had all the time in the world. That made the bikers madder than ever. They wanted him to react. They wanted him to be afraid. But he wasn't giving them what they wanted. Not one bit. Inside, though, something was brewing. You couldn't see it on his face, but it was there. Harold wasn't just some old guy waiting for the trouble to pass. He wasn't helpless. He wasn't weak. Those bikers didn't know it yet, but they were poking at something big. Something strong. Something that could turn this whole mess upside down. Harold's quiet didn't mean he was scared. It meant he was waiting. The neighbors kept watching, hiding behind their curtains. The bikers kept circling, tossing more junk, kicking more dirt. The porch was a mess now, cans everywhere, dirt all over the steps. But Harold stayed put. He didn't run inside. He didn't shout. He just watched them with those sharp eyes, like he was figuring something out. What was he planning? Was he going to let them keep going? Or was he getting ready for something they'd never expect? The tension was thick, like the air before a big storm. The bikers thought they were in charge. They thought they could do whatever they wanted. They thought Harold was nothing. But they were so wrong. Something was coming. Something big. And Harold? He was right in the middle of it, calm as ever, with a secret nobody saw yet. Days went by after the bikers first showed up. But they didn't leave. Nope. They kept coming back to Harold's little house, like flies buzzing around a picnic. Every day, they'd roll into town on their loud motorcycles, engines growling like angry dogs. They'd yell mean things, throw junk, and make a big mess just because they could. One time, they even knocked over Harold's mailbox, kicked it right off its post with their big boots, laughing like it was the funniest game ever. "You're nothing, old man," the leader shouted one day. His name? Well, everyone called him Scruffy Beard because of that messy, wild beard sticking out all over his face. He was the loudest and the meanest of the bunch. He'd stand there, hands on his hips, grinning like he owned the whole town. "You're just a weak old grandpa," he barked, spitting on the ground. The other bikers laughed, revving their bikes to make more noise. But Harold? He didn't yell back. He didn't cry or run inside. He stayed cool as a cucumber. After they left, he'd shuffle out to the yard, pick up the mess they made, and fix whatever they broke. He'd grab the dented mailbox, set it back up, and sweep the dirt off his porch, all without saying a word. Most people would have been mad or scared. Not Harold. He was calm. Too calm, maybe. And if you looked really close, you'd see something funny. His hands didn't shake. Not even a little. They were steady and strong, like he could lift a car if he wanted to. That wasn't normal for an old guy, right? The bikers didn't notice. They were too busy being loud and mean. They'd ride by every day, tossing empty cans, kicking rocks, and shouting stuff like, "Hey, Grandpa, where's your walker?" or "Go back to your rocking chair." They thought Harold was weak because he didn't fight back. They thought he was scared because he stayed quiet. But Harold wasn't scared. He was something else. Something they couldn't see yet. One sunny afternoon, a kid from the neighborhood saw it all happen. His name was Tommy, a skinny little boy with messy brown hair and a curious face. He liked riding his bike around town, and he'd seen the bikers mess with Harold lots of times. This time, he stopped pedaling and watched from across the street. Harold was out there again, fixing his mailbox after the bikers smashed it. Tommy tilted his head, confused. Why didn't Harold do something? Tommy dropped his bike in the grass and walked over. "Hey, Mr. Harold," he said, kicking a pebble with his sneaker. "Why don't you tell 'em off? Those guys are jerks. I'd yell at 'em if they did that to me." Harold stopped what he was doing. He turned to Tommy and smiled a small, sneaky smile. His eyes twinkled, like stars popping out at night. "Sometimes, kid," Harold said, his voice soft but strong, "you wait for the right moment." Tommy frowned. "Huh? What's that mean?" he asked, scratching his head. Wait for the right moment? What moment? Was Harold going to yell at them later? Or maybe call the cops? Tommy didn't get it. But Harold didn't explain. He just patted the mailbox, making sure it stood straight, and went back to work. Tommy stood there for a minute, thinking hard. Then he shrugged, grabbed his bike, and rode off. But he couldn't stop wondering what was Mr. Harold up to. The bikers didn't know any of this. They didn't see Tommy talking to Harold. They didn't see that twinkle in Harold's eye. They were too busy making noise and acting tough. Every day, they'd come back, thinking they were the kings of the town. They'd circle Harold's house, throw more stuff, and laugh like bullies on a playground. "Look at him!" Scruffy Beard would yell. "Too old to do anything about it?" And the others would cheer, like it was a big party. But here's the thing, they didn't notice Harold watching them. Oh, he was watching, all right. Every single day. He'd sit on his porch, sipping his lemonade, looking all quiet and calm. But his eyes? They followed everything. He saw how they moved, how Scruffy Beard always walked in front, how the skinny one with the pointy nose liked to throw cans, how the short guy revved his bike the loudest. He heard how they talked mean and loud, but sloppy, like they didn't think before they spoke. Harold was putting pieces together, like a puzzle in his head. Nobody else saw it. The neighbors stayed inside, peeking out their windows but never coming out. The kids like Tommy rode by but didn't stick around long. The bikers thought they were winning. They thought Harold was just an old man who couldn't stop them. But the tension was growing. It was like a big storm getting ready to hit. You couldn't hear it yet, but you could feel it in the air. Something was coming. Something big. Harold didn't rush. He didn't shout or chase them off. He just kept watching, waiting, picking up the mess they left behind. His hands stayed steady. His face stayed calm. But inside, he was getting ready. For what? Nobody knew. Not the bikers, not Tommy, not the neighbors hiding behind their curtains. Harold had a plan, or maybe just an idea. And he wasn't going to show it until the time was right. The bikers kept coming. The days got noisier. The porch got messy. But Harold stayed the same, quiet, cool, and tricky in his own way. What was he waiting for? Was he going to snap one day and yell? Was he going to call someone to help? Or was it something way cooler than that? You could feel it building, like when you're on a roller coaster climbing up, up, up before the big drop. It all happened on a bright, sunny Saturday. The sleepy little town was quiet until it wasn't. The bikers came back, and this time, they were louder and meaner than ever. Their motorcycles roared like a pack of angry lions, shaking the ground. Dust flew up behind them, making big clouds in the air. They weren't just here to tease anymore. Nope. They were done playing games, and they wanted everyone to know it. Scruffy Beard, the big guy with the messy beard, led the way. He jumped off his bike so fast the ground thumped under his heavy boots. His face was red, his eyes were wild, and he stomped right toward Harold's creaky old porch. Harold was sitting there, like always, sipping his lemonade. He looked calm, like nothing was wrong. But Scruffy Beard wasn't calm. Not one bit. "We're done playing, Grandpa," he shouted, pointing a big finger at Harold. "Get up and face us. Now." The other bikers stayed on their bikes, watching with mean grins. They revved their engines, making the noise even louder, like they were cheering Scruffy on. They thought this was it. Harold would finally run or beg or cry. They thought he was just an old man who couldn't do anything. They laughed, slapping their knees, waiting for him to shake in his shoes. But Harold didn't shake. He didn't run. He didn't even look scared. He set his lemonade down on the little table next to his chair, slow, real slow, like he had all the time in the world. Then he stood up. The bikers kept laughing, pointing at him. "Look at him," one yelled. "He's gonna fall over." But then Harold took a step forward, and something changed. Something big. His shoulders went back, like he was standing taller than ever. His eyes got hard, like rocks that wouldn't break. His face didn't look soft or old anymore, it looked strong, tough, like he could stare down a bear and win. Suddenly, he didn't seem like a slow old grandpa. He seemed different. Dangerous, even. The bikers' laughs got quieter. They didn't know what was happening, but they could feel it. Something wasn't right. Harold looked right at Scruffy Beard, his voice low and steady. "You boys sure you want this?" he asked. It wasn't loud. It wasn't mean. But it was heavy, like a warning bell ringing slow and deep. Scruffy Beard blinked. He wasn't used to Harold talking back. For a second, he didn't know what to say. Then he sneered, showing his teeth like a mad dog. "What are you gonna do, huh?" he snapped. "Hit us with your lemonade." The other bikers laughed again, but it sounded nervous now, not so sure. That's when it happened. Harold moved fast. So fast you'd miss it if you blinked. In one smooth move, he grabbed Scruffy Beard's arm, the big, strong arm that Scruffy thought made him tough. Harold twisted it behind Scruffy's back, quick as a flash, and pushed down hard. Scruffy didn't even have time to yell. He dropped to his knees, right there in the dirt, his face smashed with surprise. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He just stared up at Harold, eyes wide like he'd seen a ghost. The other bikers froze. Their laugh stopped dead. Their jaws dropped so low you could have fit a whole apple in their mouths. They didn't move. They didn't blink. They just stared, like they couldn't believe what they saw. Harold, an old man with gray hair and a faded sweater, had taken down their big, tough leader in 1 second flat. How? How could he do that? One of the bikers, the skinny one with the pointy nose, finally found his voice. Who are you?" he stammered, his words all shaking. His hands gripped his bike so tight his knuckles turned white. The others nodded, still staring, waiting for an answer. They didn't know what to think. Was this a trick? Was Harold some kind of magic guy? Harold didn't rush. He kept Scruffy's arm twisted, holding him down easy, like it was no big deal. Then he looked down at Scruffy, calm as ever, and spoke. "Name's Harold Kane," he said, his voice clear and strong. "Fought in Nam. Took down tougher guys than you before breakfast." Boom. The truth hit like a thunderclap, loud and shocking. Harold Kane. Nam, that's what people called Vietnam, a big war from a long time ago. Harold wasn't just a grandpa. He was a war hero. A real one. He'd been in battles, faced danger, and beat guys way scarier than these loud bikers. All this time, under that quiet face and old sweater, he'd been hiding something huge. And now they knew. The bikers didn't move. Scruffy Beard stayed on his knees, breathing hard, his face red with shame. The others looked at each other, eyes big, mouth still open. They'd been picking on him for days, throwing cans, kicking dirt, knocking over his mailbox. They thought he was weak. They thought he was nothing. But they were so wrong. Harold was tougher than all of them put together. And they just found out the hard way. The air felt different now. Heavy. Quiet. The engines weren't roaring anymore. The laughing was gone. Harold let go of Scruffy's arm and stepped back, standing tall. Scruffy scrambled to his feet, rubbing his arm, not looking at anyone. The bikers didn't know what to do. They'd picked a fight with the wrong guy. A really wrong guy. The bikers stood there, frozen like statues. They didn't know what to do. Their big, tough leader, Scruffy Beard, was on his knees in the dirt, looking small and silly. Harold held his arm tight, not letting go, calm as ever. Scruffy squirmed, wiggling like a worm on a hook, but he couldn't get free. His face was red, his eyes wide, and he finally mumbled something. "Sorry, man," he said, his voice all shaky. "We didn't know." Harold looked at him for a second, his sharp eyes steady. Then he nodded, just a little, and let go of Scruffy's arm. Scruffy flopped forward, catching himself with his hands, breathing hard. Harold took a step back, standing tall, his shoulders strong. "Clean up my porch," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "and we'll call it even." The bikers blinked. Clean up? They weren't used to taking orders. They were the tough guys, right? But not today. Today, they'd messed with the wrong old man. Scruffy rubbed his arm, still on the ground, and looked up at his gang. "You heard him," he muttered, sounding grumpy but scared. "Get moving." And just like that, the bikers scrambled. They jumped off their bikes so fast you'd think the seats were hot. They ran to the porch, grabbing the empty soda cans they'd thrown before. The skinny one with the pointy nose picked up 3 cans at once, his hands shaking. The short guy who liked loud engines swept dirt off the steps with his jacket sleeve, not even looking up. Scruffy got up slow, brushing off his knees, and started fixing the mailbox they'd kicked over. Their faces were red, bright red, like they'd been caught stealing cookies and had to give them back. It was funny to watch. These big, loud guys who'd been so mean were now running around like scared kids, cleaning up the mess they'd made. Harold didn't help. He didn't have to. He just stood there, arms crossed, watching them work. The porch started looking good again. No more cans, no more dirt, no more junk. The bikers didn't talk much. They just moved fast, heads down, like they wanted to finish and get out of there quick. Word spread fast in the sleepy little town. It was like someone lit a match and the news ran wild. Neighbors who'd been hiding behind their curtains couldn't stay inside anymore. They peeked out, then stepped onto their porches, eyes big as dinner plates. "That's Harold," one lady whispered to her husband, pointing at him. "The war vet." Her husband nodded, scratching his head, like he couldn't believe it either. Kids started showing up too. Tommy, the boy with the messy hair who talked to Harold before, rode his bike over as fast as he could. He stopped at the edge of the yard, staring with his mouth open. Other kids who'd giggled and called Harold the lonely old guy came running, their sneakers slapping the pavement. They didn't laugh now. Nope. They stared at Harold in awe, like he was a superhero who'd just flown down from the sky. "He's so cool," one kid whispered. "He beat up the bikers." The bikers heard it all, the whispers, the gasps, the kids talking. Their faces got even redder, if that was possible. They finished cleaning the porch, stacking the cans in a neat pile and fixing the last bit of dirt on the steps. Scruffy looked at Harold, still rubbing his arm. "We're done," he said, his voice low, like he didn't want to make Harold mad again. Harold nodded. "Good," he said. "Now go." That was it. The bikers didn't argue. They didn't yell or rev their engines. They slunk back to their bikes, heads down, like dogs with their tails between their legs. They climbed on, started the engines quiet this time, and rode off. The roar was gone. The dust settled. And just like that, they were out of town, never to bother Harold again. They'd learned their lesson the hard way. Harold watched them go, his sharp eyes following until they were tiny dots on the road. Then he turned around, walked back to his creaky porch, and sat down in his chair. He grabbed his lemonade, the same glass he'd been sipping all along, and took a long, slow drink. A little smile crept onto his face. Not a big one, just a small, happy one. The quiet grandpa had taken his power back. And then some. The neighbors didn't go inside right away. They stayed out, talking to each other, still amazed. "I can't believe it," one man said, shaking his head. "Harold's a hero. A real war hero." A lady next door nodded. "He's been so quiet all this time." Who knew? They looked at Harold with new eyes, not as the lonely old guy, but as someone strong, someone special. Tommy and the kids didn't leave either. They stood by the fence, whispering and pointing. "He fought in a war," Tommy said, his voice loud with excitement. "That's why he's so tough." Another kid, a girl with pigtails, grinned. Those bikers were so dumb. They didn't know who they were messing with. They all nodded, staring at Harold like he was the coolest person they'd ever seen. Harold heard them, but he didn't say anything. He just sipped his lemonade, leaning back in his chair, enjoying the sunny day. The porch was clean. The bikers were gone. The town was quiet again, well, almost. The neighbors kept talking, and the kids kept giggling, but it was a good kind of noise now. Everyone knew the truth. Harold wasn't just an old man. He was a fighter, a winner, a guy who'd faced big stuff and come out on top. The sun started to set, painting the sky orange and pink. Harold stayed on his porch, watching it all, his little smile still there. He didn't need to say much. He didn't need to brag. He'd shown everyone who he really was, and that was enough. The bikers wouldn't be back. The town wouldn't forget. And Harold? He was happy, sitting there with his lemonade, knowing he'd won without even breaking a sweat. What a day, right? The quiet grandpa turned out to be the toughest guy around. Justice was served, and Harold got the respect he deserved. What do you think? Pretty cool ending, huh? Harold's back in charge, and the bad guys are gone for good. So, there you have it, friends. That's the whole story of Harold and those silly bikers. Pretty wild, right? Harold looked like an easy target, just an old man with gray hair, sipping lemonade on his creaky porch. Everyone thought he was weak. The bikers thought they could mess with him and laugh about it. The neighbors thought he was just a quiet grandpa. Even the kids giggled and called him the lonely old guy. But guess what? They were all wrong. Harold was tougher than anyone guessed. Way tougher. Sometimes, the people who seem the weakest are the strongest of all. Think about that for a second. Harold didn't look big or loud or scary. He didn't shout or wave his fists around. He just sat there, calm and quiet, while the bikers made their noise. But inside, he was a hero. He'd fought in a big war called Nam, faced danger, and beat guys tougher than Scruffy Beard without even blinking. All that strength was hiding under his faded sweater, waiting for the right moment to come out. And when it did, wow! Nobody saw it coming, not the bikers, not the neighbors, not even little Tommy on his bike. That's the cool thing about people. You can't always tell who's strong just by looking at them. Some people are loud and big, like the bikers, and they think that makes them tough. But real strength? It's sneaky sometimes. It hides in quiet places, in people you'd never expect. Harold was proof of that. He didn't need to brag or show off. He just waited, then bam, he showed everyone what he could do. And those bikers who picked on him, they never saw the comeback coming. Not in a million years. Think about your own life for a minute. Have you ever met someone like Harold? Maybe it's a kid at school who seems shy but turns out to be super smart or really good at something cool, like drawing or soccer. Or maybe it's a grown-up, a teacher, a grandma, or even a quiet neighbor who surprises you with something awesome. Like, maybe they tell you a story about when they were brave or strong, and you're like, whoa, really? That's what makes life fun. You never know who's hiding a secret power. I bet you've got some stories like that. What do you think? Ever met someone who shocked you like Harold did? Maybe someone you thought was boring turned out to be amazing. Tell me about it. I'd love to hear your ideas. You can write them down below the story, and we can talk about it. It's like sharing a big secret with your friends. Super fun, right? This story about Harold got my heart racing, and I hope it did for you too. Did you feel excited when he grabbed Scruffy's arm and flipped him down? Did you cheer when the bikers had to clean up the porch? I know I did. If you liked it, give it a big thumbs up so I know. And hey, share it with a friend. Tell them, you've got to hear about this cool old guy who beat up some mean bikers. It's the kind of story that makes people smile and say, no way. Harold's tale teaches us something big. Don't judge people too fast. You might think someone's weak or boring just because they're quiet or small or old. But you never know what's inside them. Maybe they're super brave, like Harold. Maybe they've done things you can't even dream of. So next time you see someone who doesn't look tough, don't be so sure. They might surprise you just like Harold surprised those bikers and turned their mean laughs into red faces. And here's another cool thing to think about, you might have some hidden strength too. Yeah, you. Maybe you're quiet sometimes, or maybe people don't notice you right away. But deep down, you've got something special. Maybe you're really good at helping friends, or you're brave when things get hard, or you've got big ideas nobody knows about yet. Harold waited for his moment, and when it came, he showed the world what he could do. You can do that too. Wait for your time, then shine bright. Until next time, keep your eyes open, okay? The world's full of surprises. You never know who's hiding a secret, like a war hero pretending to be a quiet grandpa. Or maybe it's your neighbor, your teacher, or even the kid sitting next to you in class. Watch for it. Look for the people who don't brag but still do amazing things. They're out there, and they make life so much fun. So, what's your favorite part of Harold's story? Was it when he flipped Scruffy Beard? Or when the bikers ran away with their tails down? Or maybe when the kids started cheering for him? Tell me below, I can't wait to hear. And if this story made you feel strong or happy, pass it on. Share it with someone you like, and see if they think Harold's as cool as we do. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. Harold's back on his porch now, sipping his lemonade, smiling that little smile. The bikers are gone, the town's buzzing, and everything's good again. but who knows? Maybe there's another adventure waiting out there. Keep watching, keep wondering, and keep being awesome. You never know what's coming next or who's going to surprise you. See you soon.